No! God! No! God, please, no! 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 No!
Has anyone ever heard the expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Clearly IDW hasn't. From the very beginning, I've been a massive fan of IDW's Transformers work, and in my opinion, throughout the years, they've produced some of the most fantastic Transformers stories to date. I loved essentially everything they did, from the very highs to the highest and the lows and the very lows. But what they're doing at the moment is completely ridiculous. Hasbro is going crazy at the moment. It's a good time to be a Transformers fan. Not only have they announced their new Titans Return line and the accompanying IDW comic story, as well as their new animated Combiner Wars series, they've got news on The Last Knight and Season 3 of Robots in Disguise. Oh my god, Starscream! However, they've also got other big news in terms of IDW comics. Basically, IDW does a crossover event of some sort nearly every year. This year in September, they're doing what they're calling Revolution, in which they cross over a large number of Hasbro franchises, including Transformers, G.I. Joe, and some other franchises I've never heard of before and don't care about. And to be honest, I'm fairly sure at least half of you watching have never heard of Mask or Wrong. While that in itself would be bad enough, considering how crappy Transformers crossovers have been in the past, that's not the end of it. No, IDW's Transformers lines are undergoing massive changes due to Revolution. It's not just a one-time crossover, they're keeping the universes shared this way even after the event. Yes, really. Why? For what possible purpose? Who asked for this? Remember how well that worked for everyone back in Generation 2 when G.I. Joe was occupying the Transformers universe? Ask Hotspot, he'll tell you. But he won't because he's dead. So far only one real story has been produced as a prequel in which G.I. Joe and a few others from previously mentioned franchises I don't know anything about discuss the danger the Cybertronians possess to the Earth. So already we can see it's going to be these guys against the Transformers, as per frickin' usual. And knowing how these things usually go, it's going to be a slaughter for the Transformers, just like in every other Transformers crossover where the Cybertronians are killed and killed and killed while the other franchises get off without a scratch. Joy. Already in the cover, we can see Shockwave being taken down with a mere pistol, and I'm not even going to go into what's wrong with that. Oh, and Shockwave's already dead. Imagine how they're going to treat the alive characters. See, the reason G.I. Joe and Transformers crossovers have never worked in the past is because the two franchises have no correlation whatsoever. In fact, all Transformers crossovers pretty much flop because the Autobots and Decepticons have never crossed over with any franchises that would actually be relevant to what they are. Where's our Pacific Rim crossover? Gundam? Evangelion? Oh wait, they did that. No, instead, we get things like Avengers and Transformers and all that garbage, and every time it has been awful. So who's to say Revolution is going to be any different, especially considering IDW's notoriety for killing characters? This isn't going to be interesting or intriguing. It's going to be an overpowering and overbearing crossover that no one asked for, and unfortunately the effects of it will be long-lasting. Not only that, but both what used to be Robots in Disguise and More Than Meets the Eye are ending and being replaced with two new ongoing series, Optimus Prime and Lost Light. Why? Both series just celebrated their 50th issue and everyone was excited to get to 100. So why the hell are you replacing the two with these new lines that are essentially the same goddamn thing? And why the hell does Rodimus look like that? I wonder what possible ridiculous reason James Roberts has in store for us. Ugh. One reason I preferred More Than Meets the Eye over Robots in Disguise is, barring the obvious, because it stayed out of the large crossover events and cash-in tie-ins that Hasbro does every now and then. For example, Combiner Wars tainted only Windblade and Robots in Disguise, leaving More Than Meets the Eye out of it. In my opinion, Combiner Wars was an awful mess that didn't live up to any of our expectations. If any of you liked it, I apologise, but I for one was not a fan of it. But this new Revolution thing is going to affect both lines, not just Robots in Disguise this time, or Optimus Prime, or whatever the hell you want to call it. Who knows? Maybe there's a slim chance it won't suck. I'm not the one here saying that IDW is absolute garbage that should die and that the crossover is doomed to fail. I'm just discussing my low expectations for it and my disapproval of the long-lasting effects afterwards. Keep it as just a crossover if you must. Come on, Hasbro. Sorry you had to listen to me ranting. I don't usually turn into this butthurt fanboy like this. I'm just praying that IDW either reconsiders or does this right, though I sincerely doubt they'll do either.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay? No more!
nature, nurture, heaven and home. Some of all and by them driven to conquer every mountain shown.
Kicker, transform! Kicker, there isn't much time. Bring it on, Scorpo Nut! Kicker, I'll stall him while you and the other Fighters make a break for Kicker! Ah! Kicker!
On June 23rd of this year, Machinima began teasing an all-new Transformers animated series, Combiner Wars, a cartoon aimed at older audiences containing violence and an intense plot. And now it's finally here. And it's... While I would love to do a full video review on this series, copyright regulations wouldn't allow. So instead I'm just going to discuss my brief thoughts. While only 3 5-minute episodes have been produced so far, Combiner Wars so far has just been disappointing. I'm honestly trying to work out whether it's awful or awesome. It's not bad by any means, mostly, but it was nowhere near as good as what I'm sure we were all expecting. I guess that goes for all things nowadays. Looking at you, No Man's Sky. The plot follows its own micro-continuity based on the IDW comics in which the war has ended, and Megatron and Optimus have been exiled, leaving Starscream, Rodimus and the Mistress of Flame as part of the council that ruled Cybertron. Using the enigma of combination, various combiners have been created, but they've gotten out of control, causing damage during their epic battles on planets aside from Cybertron. One of these is Caminus, where an unlucky Windblade gets herself involved in a clash between Combutron and Menacer. She and her partner Maxima do their best to fend off Menacer after the Decepticon Combiner tore apart Combutron, but Maxima is killed in the skirmish. Windblade manages to fell the Combiner, but is left distraught and vengeful. She travels to Cybertron to enact her revenge, but is stopped by Optimus Prime, who wishes to spare Windblade of the terror that is war. And that's where the series is at as of this video. So the plot's pretty good. What about the rest of it? I for one love the animation style. Though it frequently lags and the lip syncing is horrifically off, the animation is impressive and features awesome designs of characters. I particularly like Starscream's new design, based on his toy. So what's wrong with it? Well, being a web series, I can't blame Machinima for not having A-list voice actors for their characters, but the voice acting in this series is god-awful. Take Menace's voice, for example.
Zero! What a nerd. Your city can't hear you anymore. Your people are never coming back. The council has the enigma of combination. They're gonna build an army of combiners!
Thank Primus he's dead. He sounds like a high school bully, if anything. John Bailey, voice for Optimus Prime, does a great impression of the characters for YouTube videos and skits, but unfortunately doesn't make a very convincing Prime. Windblade's voice actor just doesn't fit her character, and sounds very unenthusiastic. I don't blame her. And Starscream, well... it has promise. The third episode certainly showed improvement from the previous two, though the series is still ridden with errors. While not awful, it does have a lot wrong with it, though we can only hope it continues to improve with each new installment. Plus it's kind of violent, which is a very nice break from the ridiculously kid-friendly robots in disguise. It's too early to judge the series too harshly, and I'm interested to see where it's going to go. The series is available for you to watch on YouTube, so if you haven't checked it out yet, definitely be sure to. Just, please get a new voice actor for Starscream. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you love the series or hate it? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I'm going to do a full review on the series once it reaches its climax, but at the moment I just wanted to discuss my brief thoughts on it, assuming many of you have probably already seen it. Thanks, and I'll see you guys soon. I am usually a very passive person when it comes to watching movies and TV shows. I'm the kind of person that sat through Civil War and didn't notice the many flaws that everyone on the internet seems to love pointing out, and loved the movie for what it was. I also sat through both Ghostbusters and Batman vs Superman this year and thought they were okay. So when I finally got to watching Machinima's Combiner Wars midway through this year, I came out of it thinking it was meh, and was able to tolerate it for a really long time, and before the final few episodes even thought it was good. As I said in my first thoughts video a few months ago, when the only episodes out were the first 3, I thought the show had potential and thought it would improve, and the following episodes raised my hope even more. And then the ending happened, and that's the reason it's on Ruined Forever. The series is comprised of 8 episodes that average at 5 minutes in length, and 4 preludes that serve as introduction to the characters and plot. In this video, we're taking a look at what makes Machinima's Combiner Wars as awful as it is. The basic plot of Combiner Wars sees a vengeful Windblade seeking revenge on Combiners after Computron and Menacer beat each other up on Caminus and caused a really small amount of damage to the planet, and so she travels to Cybertron to try and destroy the Enigma of Combination, a MacGuffin device never explained by the show. She is stopped by Optimus, who apparently has been exiled from Cybertron along with Megatron following the end of the Great War, which saw the arrival of a new council that is comprised of literally 3 people: the Mistress of Flame, Rodimus, and Starscream. After convincing her that they need backup, the 2 head off to find Megatron, who reluctantly agrees to work with Prime. The 3 then head back to the council to storm the base, and despite meeting heavy resistance, are only stopped by the sudden betrayal of Starscream, who tries taking the Enigma for himself, and the arrival of 4 Combiners allows him to transform into a Super Combiner of sorts, which apparently means a giant floating head according to Machinima. Starscream manages to serve as a threat for a whole of 1 episode, which is impressive for this show, though was finally taken down when Windblade crushes him after summoning Metroplex's arm from the ground or something. Just his arm. The ending of the show was what brought it down from mediocre to terrible. I imagine I was among many others who believed Starscream would become some sort of Mega Combiner, and while not original, would have been much better than what he actually became. Starscream, after absorbing the 4 Combiners using the Enigma, transforms into a giant screaming floating head that doesn't really do anything except die. I thought people were joking when they said that this show was like a bad fanfiction, but it's totally like a bad fanfiction.
For a show called Combiner Wars has very little focus on the actual combiners, and the only combiners seen warring are Computron and Menacer punching each other a few times in the first episode, but both of them die by the end of it with some added help from a vengeful Windblade. Aside from the aforementioned Windblade, the rest of the show has very little characters, the only others being Optimus Prime, Megatron, Starscream, the Mistress of Flame, and Rodimus, the latter two having absolutely zero personality whatsoever. Optimus Prime is portrayed very similar to his Generation 1 counterpart with some bad voice acting added in, and Windblade is nothing like her city speaker self in the IDW comics, instead a vicious killer with a bloodlust for combiners. I thought I didn't like Windblade in the comics, but she is so much better than the bland and one-sided one in this show who tries to take center stage but ends up coming out a very dull and unlikable character. She is very much intent on killing the combiners, even if all they did was make a bit of a mess on Caminus. Since the show never provides exposition for anything, including why the war ended, and what the combiners are and where they came from, it's difficult to tell whether this was one of their worst incidents, but Windblade sure seems to act like it is. Maxima, an all-new character teased for screenshots in the show, served as an empty motivation for Windblade as she died in the first episode of the show. I don't know why Windblade is upset, considering Maxima had no personality or character whatsoever. She sure is easy to break apart though. The show acts as if the combiners are a massive threat, but considering Windblade is able to put Menacer down with relative ease, this is quite questionable. The combiners I wouldn't even consider to be characters, rather objects, as that is the only purpose they serve in the whole 8 episodes. The only combiners seen in the show are Menacer, Computron, Victorion, and Devastator. The first two die in the first episode and are awfully portrayed, and then they're all revived at the end of the show for absolutely no reason. Okay. Devastator does nothing but smash things, and Victorion literally shows up out of nowhere to do nothing in the 6th episode, aside from being used by Starscream to power himself up. This is hilariously ironic considering she was the only one with a Prelude episode of the 4, and yet is the only one to do absolutely nothing. My biggest complaint is that the combiners are displayed as their own separate species, and the only time we see the individual components are Scrapper, Scavenger, and Longhaul of Devastator, who get their arse handed to them by Megatron, but they receive no personality or character whatsoever, or even any speaking lines. They apparently beep like that of Minicons, presumably because giving them individual personality was too difficult for the writers. The only exception to this plague of awful characters is Megatron, who is portrayed with a more joking personality. He has a sense of humour and cracks a lot of jokes, though still manages to maintain his thirst for violence and destruction, and it works splendidly well. Megatron was what made the show bearable, and this new take on him worked to surprising success. At first glance, and from screenshots that were shown that initially had me quite excited for the show, the animation of Combiner Wars looks fantastic, with detailed and cool looking 3D models boasting that level of quality in the actual show. Unfortunately, the animation in the actual show proved to be slow, laggy, and cumbersome, making fights look slow and unimpressive, and everyone looked really stiff, like that of the animation in Transformers Energon and Cybertron, and it makes it difficult for the characters to express emotion. The only issue is that Combiner Wars manages to make the Transformers look stiff without the hindrance of added 2D animation like the aforementioned 2 shows do.
In the meantime, I can have Wheeljack.
During fight scenes, animation slowed down like that of a game being played on a computer on highest quality, and the frames dropped a noticeable amount. The animation could be worse, but it does add to what makes the show as bad as it is. The worst part of it is, the show is animated by Tatsunoko Productions, the same animators of such legendary works as Neon Genesis Evangelion and Robotech. Clearly they put in as minimal effort as possible, and I can't blame them. Though the points we've covered so far are pretty bad, none of them even compare to the voice acting, which is absolutely god-awful. As I mentioned in my first thoughts video, John Bailey, the Honest Movie Trailers voiceover guy, does a pretty good job of impersonating Optimus Prime in skits on YouTube, but his ability lacks when he tries to be Prime seriously, and it really shows. I love the guy, but this show made me lose some respect for him. It sounds like he's doing a bad impersonation of the Optimus Prime of Robots in Disguise, who himself sounds like a bad impersonation of Optimus Prime.
The truck will be returned to the station as soon as my mission is completed.
The voice acting for Menacer is the worst thing I have ever heard in my entire life, and I don't care if he's a famous YouTuber. It was atrocious and you know it. He made Menacer seem like a big bully sort of character instead of an actual threat, and the terribly added vocal effects added to him to make him sound robotic make it even worse.
Your city can't hear you anymore. Your people are never coming back. The council has the enigma of combination. They're gonna build an army of combiners!
Look, I'm not saying I could do better. In fact, I think I could claim ownership of the award for worst voice actor ever.
Jazz, look out! There's combiners, Jazz. You look out for the combiners. Oh no, Prime, there's combiners. Be careful. Combiners.
On the flip side, Starscream's voice wasn't all that bad. Until the ending, that is. And Jason Matanoka, voice of Megatron in the series, did a fantastic job, giving Megatron a voice similar to that of his animated incarnation, which, by the way, is my favorite Megatron voice ever.
The speaker who became the killer. Big fan of your work, do keep it up.
Arrogant relic! You have no idea who you're talking to.
I meant keep up the killing, not the speaking. That doesn't suit you.
His talent added to the show and was what saved Megatron from ending up like every other character in the show. Absolutely god-awful. When it was announced, Combiner Wars promised to be a series aimed more at older audiences with a more violent and mature story. The first episode really tries to earn its mature rating by having Maxima break into several pieces when she was knocked away by Menacer. But the violence in the show is pathetically tame in comparison to that of Transformers Prime, and the story of the show is so poorly executed that it's impossible for anyone to enjoy it. On top of that, Starscream's prelude saw Starscream narrating how he was truly on the path to redemption, and then in the show betrays everyone in a typical Starscream manner. This is supposed to be one of those dramatic plot twists, but the prelude just straight up lied to us, unless Starscream is suffering from multiple personality disorder. It's like Hans' plot twist as a villain in Frozen. His character is falsely built up to be a hero, even when he is alone and isn't being watched, and then blatantly comes out as a villain. It's not a dramatic twist, it's just bad writing. Combiner Wars was a disappointing and anticlimactic series plagued by poor voice acting, a nonsensical plot, and awful characterization. Though all in all, I can't complain too much. The show was for free. For those outside the States, Combiner Wars was available to watch on YouTube, though has since been removed. You didn't have to pay for it, though if you lived in the US, you did have to have the streaming service Go90 to watch it. For something free, it's reasonably mediocre. However, that's not to say Combiner Wars didn't have its strong points. The battle with Optimus and Megatron was almost cool, as was the scene where Megatron transforms into a gun and is fired by Optimus in the final episode. It's not unwatchable and it's not god-awful, it's just painfully mediocre. It is not worse than Transformers Energon. In fact, Energon makes Combiner Wars look decent. The biggest issue with the show are the noticeable flaws and the disappointment of it not living up to its own promises. However, the one saving grace of the show was, as I previously mentioned, Megatron. I absolutely loved the Megatron in the show, and thought that he almost saved the whole thing. I'd honestly love to see more of him. And apparently we will see more of him, as Combiner Wars appears to be slated for 2 sequels based on the succeeding toy lines. Titan's Return, and Power of the Primes, as evident by a shot of Fortress Maximus awakening at the end of the show.
A hero to rise up and take control. For the pride of mankind is what sets us apart. We fight for our freedom, we follow our heart. Transformers, all that needs the Autobots are watching over you. Transformers, robots in the sky, ready to die for what we love. From a far-off place in a distant world comes an army of metal, a vision of destruction. Autobots are watching over you. It's time to take sides for the pride of our people. A hero will rise and a villain will challenge. Ready to die for what we love.
The many years of Transformers has raised some interesting questions across the years, most of which have gone unanswered, such as where the heck was Red Alert during Transformers Energon, and was it Skywalker Bombshell who became Cyclonus? With today marking the second anniversary of this channel, I wanted to cover one of the biggest questions ever presented to Transformers. Where the hell did Sam go in the... How on earth do War for Cybertron and Prime connect? Well, simply put, they don't. In this video, we're going to be looking at some of the main reasons as to why that is. The aligned continuity falls under the Yumenine cluster in the Transformers multiverse, and this encompasses the War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron games, the non-movie half of Rise of the Darkspark, the Prime cartoon, Rescue Bots cartoon, Robots in Disguise cartoon, and all accompanying media such as comics and novels. It all began in 2010, when Hasbro decided that all of their future Transformers series, barring the movies and IDW comics, would be part of this aligned continuity, and so have stated that all of the previously mentioned series are a part of this one big continuous story. I split the aligned continuity into two, the Cybertron games as one half and the cartoon portion as another. The cartoon portion is comprised of 3 shows, Prime, Rid, and Rescue Bots, and the 3 shows all share the same continuous plot, with Robots in Disguise being a direct sequel to Prime and constantly referencing past events, as well as containing characters from the past show, and Rescue Bots having guest appearances from characters in the other 2 shows, such as Bumblebee and Sideswipe.
The entirety of Rescue Bots takes place on the small and remote Griffin Rock, which is located far away from any other civilization. This is what allows Rescue Bots to continuously tell its story alongside Prime, as the Rescue Bots are simply not there for any of the events that happen in Prime. The Cybertron games are the same in their own right. War for Cybertron tells the tale of the early section of the war, while Fall of Cybertron continues directly after it with the latter half of the war. Rise of the Darkspark just does its own thing, fitting somewhere in between these two games. So that's all well and good. But it's how these two halves of this aligned continuity fit together that a problem arises. Let's look at what does work. At the end of Fall of Cybertron, it is revealed that the Decepticons' ship, the Nemesis, is the transformed form of Trypticon, who, after running out of energy, became stuck in this form, unable to transform back. Then, in the episode of Prime Flying Mind, after an encounter with Dark Energon, the Nemesis begins speaking to the Decepticons. Who is this mysterious voice? Trypticon, of course! Though not explicitly mentioned in the episode, the creators have mentioned that the initial intent of this episode was to have Trypticon briefly reactivated. So at least they're trying to make things fit. What else works? Well, both the Prime cartoon and War for Cybertron detail Orion Pax's origin into Optimus Prime, and feature the same characters. Bumblebee, for example, carries over his lost voice from Fall of Cybertron into Prime. But, wait a minute, in Fall of Cybertron, B lost his voice taking a shot for Optimus from Megatron. But in Prime, Bumblebee is just attacked by Megatron and had his voice box destroyed, like that of his movie self. But these conflicting origins can be merely overlooked. Maybe the Prime recount of the tale was just a simplified version. But then we look at some of the characters that appear in both medias, specifically those who appear in Robots in Disguise. The first and second seasons of the show saw the appearance of Jazz, Sideswipe and Grimlock, characters who have all previously appeared in either War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron, or in the former two's case, both. Issue is, the Cybertron game versions of the characters take character attributes directly from their Generation 1 incarnations, right down to the grappling hook. The Robots in Disguise versions, however, seem to do their own thing. While Jazz is reasonably similar to his War for Cybertron self, Sideswipe and Grimlock are not so easily overlooked. Sideswipe in the Cybertron games was exactly like his Generation 1 self. Arrogant, careless and trigger-happy. Then all of a sudden in Robots in Disguise, he's this young punk causing trouble on Cybertron. What the hell? What happened to him? Well, there is an explanation to this. Sideswipe is described as both young and a teenager, indicating he was one of the newly created Sparks at the end of Prime. So he's a different Sideswipe to the one we see in War for Cybertron. This begs the question, what happened to the original Sideswipe, and why did Bumblebee seem to know who Sideswipe was at the beginning of Robots in Disguise? Well, I don't have an answer to the former question, but the latter can be easily explained away as Sideswipe simply being a mischievous kid that Bumblebee had to deal with on numerous occasions. So that's one conundrum solved. And then there's Grimlock. Fall of Cybertron detailed Grimlock's Dinobot origin, displaying him as a creation of Shockwave. At the end of the game, a massive explosion appears to kill both Grimlock and Shockwave as the Dinobot attempted to get his revenge, as the other Dinobots watched. But, clearly both don't die. Or at least, Shockwave didn't, as we all know, he still makes an appearance in the Prime cartoon. Grimlock, on the other hand, isn't seen until Robots in Disguise, but there he appears as a Decepticon convict with a completely different personality. This brings so many questions to the table. Why is he a Decepticon? Why was he on a Decepticon prison ship? Why is he such an idiot all of a sudden? Well, some hero decided to ask the official Transformers Facebook page, and we finally received our official response. I did. Yes, unfortunately they asked this question during the unfortunate time that Sideways had taken over the Q&A segment, and so simply received that as an answer. Okay, say Sideways was responsible for this, despite his numerous accounts of lying in the past. Just bear with me here for a minute. That doesn't explain how he ended up as both a Decepticon and on the Alchemorph. It also doesn't explain why the Autobots, specifically Bumblebee, don't recognize him. All evidence points to him being a different Grimlock to the Fall of Cybertron one, and the best explanation that I can come up with is that it was a Dinobot who merely named himself after the legendary Grimlock. To provide us with even more evidence to strengthen our case, the creators of Robots in Disguise themselves have specifically mentioned that they consider the Robots in Disguise Grimlock at least a separate character to the Fall of Cybertron Grimlock. This is because while they initially intended to include Grimm's origin story in Robots in Disguise, it would be at odds with the happier and light-hearted tone of the show, hence the second Grimlock. So that solved one issue. But what happened to the original Grimlock? Did he die? Well, no, because in the canon Rage of the Dinobots comic, we see him and the other Dinobots alive and well on Cybertron fighting alongside the likes of Ultra Magnus and Chromia, battling Predacons. Yes, Predacons, the very same Predacons we see later in Prime. So this does give us a link between the two, and then raises even more questions. The Autobots returned to Cybertron in the Predacons Rising movie. Where were the Dinobots?
What happened to all the other Autobots we saw? Hence why we can't use the comic as a reliable source of information. It just raises more questions despite attempting to combine the two stories. These questions then increase even more in the sequel to Rage of the Dinobots, the Beast Hunters comic, which focuses on the Dinobots on Cybertron, but also features the cast of the Prime cartoon. This sequel series also apparently takes place after the events of Predacons Rising. So what this is suggesting is that the Dinobots were on Cybertron throughout all of the Prime cartoon, and only after the Autobots finally return to live on Cybertron do they find them again. So that makes sense, right? This ties things together. It makes sense on its own, but the main issue between the two stories, even if we overlook the weird personality and character changes and messed up locations, the two stories seem to fit loosely together. That is, until you take into account Dark Energon. Here's where things fall apart. Dark Energon played a very large part in both the Prime cartoon and Cybertron games. Megatron found the Dark Energon in two separate ways in both of the two halves of this aligned continuity. In War for Cybertron, Dark Energon had already been known for 10,000 years, and was sealed away for being too dangerous with the Seekers to guard it. Of course, this didn't stop Megatron from finding it, and he then began to expose himself to it, and it made him ultra powerful. It played a prominent role in both games, and Megatron didn't seem to lose it in the aftermath. But then in Prime, Megatron finds it again, discovering a chunk of it in space. He didn't have any memory of finding it, and seemed to act as if he had never seen this substance before. The Dark Energon in Prime also had different properties to that of the War for Cybertron one, causing those who take it to become rabid, such as the ill-fated Cliffjumper, while in War for Cybertron it merely granted power. This doesn't make any sense at all. Why wouldn't Megatron remember the Dark Energon? Why doesn't he have it anymore? This is the biggest issue with attempting to fit these two halves of the continuity together, and unfortunately it makes it impossible to do so. So why does this happen? If Hasbro intended for this to all follow the same story, why has it contradicted itself on numerous accounts? Well, this is due to a number of reasons, but the main one is clashing visions. Different writers are hired to write different stories, and as a result it is very difficult to maintain a constant continuity. You'd be surprised how many writers don't refer to their source material when writing for a series. Another main reason for this is trademarking. In order to keep the names it has trademarked, Hasbro has to use them and apply them to characters. This is why Megatron kept converting to Galvatron in the Unicron trilogy, and why one of the Decepticons in Robots in Disguise is called Kickback when he has nothing to do with the Kickback from Fall of Cybertron. Though the writers have tried to keep the different series to maintain the same story, such as Starscream's humorous reference about Soundwave being a conversationalist, in reference to his mute self in Prime in Rise of the Darkspark,
No, Soundwave. Quite the conversationalist.
Due to the constant contradictions, most importantly the origin of Megatron's possession of Dark Energon, it is impossible for the aligned continuity to exist as a single ongoing story, despite the numerous attempts to do so. If you squint, Prime and War for Cybertron could work as one story, but that requires you to turn a blind eye to a variety of continuity errors. Maybe if you squint, just maybe. But then Robots in Disguise happens, and then the plot holes become too great to ignore. So what's the solution to all of this? I present to you Splinter Timelines. I imagine many of you guys have heard this phrase before, but if you haven't, it has to do with parallel universes that share the same events, barring one change that has various impacts, great and small. This aligned continuity could be us looking into several of these universes, with one where Megatron discovers Dark Energon back on Cybertron, and another where he finds it on Earth, but he's still the same guy in Prime as he is in War for Cybertron. What about the other things, such as the issue with two Grimlocks? It's not too far-fetched to say he could be the same person. With Splinter Timelines, it could be possible, but I'll leave those theories to you guys. Thanks for watching. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that video. I certainly enjoyed making it. I'd just like to take the time now to thank you all so much for 10,000 subscribers. I can't thank you enough. It means so much to me. I'm honestly still in shock about it. I've got a ton of videos planned for you guys, so stay tuned. Thanks again guys, and see you next time. Diamondbolt out.